Hello everyone. This video is on the Knewton Alta assignment for section 4.3 called Intercepts on the Coordinate Plane. In this video I'm going to be doing a preview version of this assignment. So please understand that the questions I'm going to see in this video may not be the same questions that you see when you work on the assignment yourself. But the objectives are the same, the structure is similar, so I'm hoping that watching me do these here helps you in some way when you work on the assignment on your own. Now on your assignment page you should be seeing the title, the mastery bar telling you how far along you've gotten, the objectives. Looks like there are 3 objectives for this assignment. Under the current objective, there is a question related to that objective. And at the bottom of every question, there should be a feedback button, which you can send feedback to Knewton through. You will not have this instructor cheat button. Right, this is for instructors only. But you will have a more instruction button. If you're struggling with a topic, click on this and it'll take you to a page with some reading or videos to study, and then you'll be given questions related to that instruction, and completing those questions will progress you through the assignment. Alright, so the first objective I'm looking at is find the x and y intercepts from an equation of a line. Now I have brought these words up, x-intercept and y-intercept, in section 4.2's assignment, but we weren't actually introduced to that concept yet in 4.2. But here it is, x-intercepts and y-intercepts. So x-intercepts for a graph of an equation. X-intercepts are just any point of the equation, any point of the graph that's on the x-axis. Points of graph on the x-axis. And they always look like this. They'll have some x value, and then the y coordinate will always be 0. This is always the case. Y equals 0 for any point of a graph that's going to be on the x-axis for any of these x-intercepts. And then it's very similar for any y-intercepts a graph might have. So y-intercepts of a graph are points of the graph, solutions of the equation, that end up on the y-axis. So that means their ordered pairs are going to look like this. It'll be 0 for the x and then some y value. But the key here is that the x coordinate is going to be 0 for points on the y-axis for the graph, or any solution that's considered a y-intercept. And what I've highlighted in red here is how you're going to find these. How do you find an x-intercept or x-intercepts for a graph of an equation? You set y to be 0 and then solve for x. And then how do you find y-intercepts for the graph of an equation? You set x to be 0 and solve for y. And it's really that simple. So for this first equation I'm given here, and these should all be linear equations, I believe. The graphs will be straight lines on the xy coordinate plane, the rectangular coordinate plane. The first equation I'm given here is 3x plus 5y equals 15. And I'm asked to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept for the graph of this line. And I already talked about how to find them, right? So for x-intercept, we set the y-coordinate to be 0. Right, I'm gonna replace y with 0, and that'll leave me with this equation: 3x plus 5 times 0 equals 15. And the nice thing about 5 times 0 is that that's just 0. So that's gone, and I'm left with just 3x on the left equals 15. And then dividing both sides by 3, I get x equals 5. And putting these together, the x-intercept is the point 5 for the x-coordinate, comma, and then of course 0 for the y-coordinate. Right. And this is one of the answers they want. Right. And if I were graphing the line on the xy plane, this point is the point of the graph on the x-axis, right? I go to 5 on the x-axis, positive 5, and then 0 on the y, and I'm at this point here on the x-axis, right? There's the x-intercept, 5, 0. Right? All right, and then for the y-intercept, I'm doing something very similar. If you want to find any points of a graph on the y-axis, you set the x-coordinate to be 0. And then solve for y. So if I do that in this equation here, we'll have 3 times 0, then plus 5y equals 15. And I hope you see that 3 times 0 is just 0. So then I would just divide by 5 to get y alone, and we get y equals 3. All right, so the y-intercept would have always x-coordinate of 0 for y-intercepts, and the y-coordinate 3. And this is the other point they wanted me to find. And if I were graphing 0 on the x, 3 on the y-axis, right? This is the point of the graph that's called the y-intercept, right? 0, 3. And then the rest of the line, right? Remember, to graph a line, you only really need 2 points. And the rest of the line would fall in line with these 2 points that I've plotted here. Right? Right, like that. That way forever and that way forever. Right? There's the rest of the solutions in a picture. Alright, so back in the assignment, they just want me to fill in the coordinates, right? Now, again, the x-intercept we saw was, 5 for the x, and always 0 for the y-coordinate of an x-intercept. And then for the y-intercept, that point on the y-axis, always 0 for the x-coordinate, and then the y-intercept was 3. And then after you submit an answer, it's going to tell you whether you were correct or incorrect, and then give you some sort of answer explanation. Please read through these answer explanations, just to make sure you understand why something was correct or incorrect, and hopefully you can learn from your mistakes for future questions. Okay. Now, I think this one's even easier. This objective: identify the x and y intercepts on a graph. So you are given a graph of a line, and you're asked to find the x-intercept and y-intercept. So you're just looking for the points on the line that are on the x-axis and on the y-axis. So the x-intercept here is at 2, 0. It's very easy to see. 2 for the x, and again 0 for the y, always for x-intercepts. And then the point on the y-axis is here at -3, so 0, -3. Always 0 for the x-intercept, the x-coordinate of the y-intercept, and then -3 for the y-coordinate. And that's it. Very easy to see. That should be an easy objective in my opinion. Moving on. Same thing, we're given a graph and asked to simply identify the x and y intercepts. Now it looks like there are some halves here. Right. The x-intercept looks like it's at -5, 0. Alright, -5 for the x, 0 for the y always in x-intercepts. And then the point on the y-axis for this line looks like it's at -2.5. Alright, so I'll use -2.5 for the y-coordinate, and again 0 for the x-coordinate always for those y-intercepts, and then -2.5 for the y-coordinate. Great. Alright, and then and I already did this. I just did this with the first example from this video. Graph a line using the x and y intercepts. So all we're asked to do is plot the x and y intercepts. Alright, so I'll just write this first one out. So we have the equation, y equals negative x, or the opposite of x, plus 3. Alright, so first I'll find the x-intercept. Let's put x-int. That means set y to be 0. And if you do that, the equation is 0 equals the opposite of x plus 3. And all I would have to do is add x, get x equals 3. Alright, so the x-intercept is the point 3, 0. And if I'm plotting points, x-axis, y-axis, that's this point right here, right? 3 on the x-axis, 0 on the y. There's the x-intercept. And then the y-intercept, right, I'm putting in 0 for the x-coordinate. So y equals, the opposite of 0, which is still 0, plus 3. Y equals 3 also. Alright, so the y-intercept is 0, 3. 0 for x, positive 3 for y, and here we have the y-intercept, and then I draw the rest of the line in through these 2 points. There we go. All right, there's the graph of the rest of the line, the rest of the solutions. But we're only asked to plot the, it's graphing the line for us in the assignment. We just need to move the intercept. So the y-intercept 0, 3, x-intercept 3, 0, and you can click on the points just to make sure they're at the right places. And that should be the line. Wonderful. Okay. Another one like that. We're given an equation and only asked to move the intercepts. So if y were 0, x would have to be 6. Right, I would add 3 and then multiply by 2. 3 times 2 is 6. So 6, 0. 6 for x, 0 for y. That's the x-intercept. And if x were 0, you'd have y equals -3. So -0 for x, -3 for y is the y-intercept. And those are solutions, and the rest of the solutions are on the line that they've drawn here for us. Just finding the intercepts. Pretty easy in my opinion. Alright. Alright, so again, x-intercept, I'm putting in 0 for y. Now if I do that, you'd have 0 equals -1/4 x plus 8. I'd subtract 8, then multiply by -4. -8 times -4 is positive 32. So 32 would be the x-coordinate of the x-intercept. And of course, 0 for the y. And then for the y-intercept, right, you're putting in 0 for x. And if you do that, you're just going to get y equals 0 plus 8. Y equals 8. Right, so 0, 8 for the y-intercept, 32, 0 for the x-intercept. And that's it. It should be simple. Alright, and then this one's the really easy one. Alright, just looking at a graph, where are the intercepts? And again, if it crosses between, just assume it's at a half. So the x-intercept is at 1, 0. And the y-intercept is at 0, looks like -1/2. The point on the y-axis is at 0, -1/2. So I'll put -0.5 for the y-coordinate of the y-intercept. Great. And one more graph one. The x-intercept looks like it's at negative 2.5 on the x-axis. So negative 2.5 for the x-coordinate, and 0 for the y-coordinate. And then the y-intercept always has an x-coordinate of 0, and it looks like it crosses at positive 2.5 on the y-axis. So 0, 2.5. And that should be all they want. Alright, so that was the easy objective, right? Given a graph, tell me what the x-intercept and y-intercept are. Alright, and then they're giving us an equation of a line here. Again, I'm just going to speak this one out loud. You can write it by hand if you wish. But for the x-intercept, right, the y-coordinate 0. And if the y-coordinate is 0, you'd have 0 equals 3/5 x plus 4. You would subtract 4 and then multiply both sides by 5/3. Right? Negative 4 times 5/3 would be negative 20/3. So the x-coordinate of the x-intercept would be negative 20/3. And then for the y-intercept, you're putting in 0 for x. And if x were 0, you just have y equals 4. 0, 4. Oops. Actually move to the next slide. 0, 4. And that should be good for that equation. Great. And I think the rest of these are just finding the intercepts when you have an equation. So I'm just gonna speak them out loud. Again, you can write them out by hand, solve them by hand if you want to go step by step. But you should be able to solve linear equations pretty easily by now. Alright, so again, x-intercept has a y-coordinate of 0. And if y were 0, then you would add 7 and multiply both sides by 4/3. Right? 7 times 4/3 would be 28/3. 28 divided by 3 would be the x-coordinate of the x-intercept. Y-intercept has an x-coordinate of 0. And if x were 0, clearly y would be just 0 minus 7, negative 7 here. And there we go. Alright, so that one's done, and I think I'm just continuing to do this in the next objective as well. But this is where we're moving points though. Alright, so if y were 0, x would have to be 4. Alright, so 4, 0 is the x-intercept. Let's make sure it's 4, 0. And if x were 0, y would be 4 as well. So 0, 4 would be the y-intercept. And the rest of those points are on the line. Great. Alright, and just one more of these. I'm hoping this seems simple enough, finding the x-intercept and y-intercept. Alright, so just one more of these, and we're removing the points on the axes. Alright, so again, if y were 0, you would just have negative 4x equals 12, dividing both sides by negative 4, x would be negative 3. So the x-intercept is at negative 3, 0, and again, click on it just to make sure it's at negative 3, 0. And then if x were 0, you'd have negative 2y equals 12, dividing by negative 2, y would be negative 6. So 0, negative 6 would be the y-intercept. So negative 3, 0 for the x-intercept, 0, negative 6 for the y-intercept, and then the rest of the line is already filled in for us. Fantastic. Alright, and that should be it for this preview version of this assignment. Alright, so like I said at the top of the video, the questions I saw here may not be the same questions that you see when you work on the assignment yourself, but the objectives are the same, right? The structure is similar. So I'm hoping that watching me go through these here helps you in some way when you do it on your own. And thank you very much for watching.